The airline gave her first-class seat to a VIP, then marked her removal. Voluntary. Diane Okafor was still fastening her seatbelt in Suite 1 Alpha when she saw the lead flight attendant type something into a tablet that made her stomach tighten. The screen was angled just enough for Diane to catch 3 words before the attendant swiped them away. Reaccommodation accepted. She had not accepted anything. She had not been asked anything. Diane was 47, dressed in a soft gray sweatshirt and worn sneakers, a cracked phone in one hand and a scuffed leather folder tucked against her hip. It was the kind of folder that had survived 100 flights and looked like it belonged to someone who flew coach, not someone sitting in the most expensive seat on the aircraft. She was flying to Lisbon for a meeting that would decide whether Solara Atlantic Airways made it through the year, though almost no one on the crew had any reason to know that. Her ticket was valid. Her fare was fully paid. Her seat assignment had been confirmed weeks earlier. There was no duplicate booking, no fare hold, and no security flag on her name. The attendant, a woman named Bridget Ames, had barely finished welcoming her aboard when a man in a tailored coat appeared at the edge of the suite, breathing like he had hurried up the jet bridge. "Bridget, same arrangement as usual," he said, not quite looking at Diane. "1 Alpha is always held for me." His name was Preston Wade, a technology founder who sat on Solara's advisory board and flew the route often enough that half the crew greeted him by first name. Bridget glanced toward the boarding clock above the door, then back at Preston, the way she always did when he showed up like this. She did not tell him the seat belonged to someone else. Instead, she opened a screen built for canceled flights and broken tickets, not for a seat that was already confirmed. Diane watched a field appear and fill with language that had nothing to do with any real problem with her ticket. "What error are you seeing?" Diane asked, her voice even. "My ticket cleared at the gate. There's a discrepancy we need to sort out," Bridget said, not answering the question. "It happens sometimes with premium fares. Is there another passenger assigned to this seat?" Bridget did not answer that either. Near the front galley, another traveler's boarding pass would not load, and a crew member helped her for a full minute without questioning her fare. No special screen was opened for her. "Has my payment failed?" Diane asked. "Because my statement shows it cleared 3 weeks ago." Bridget's fingers paused over the screen. Something that looked almost like doubt crossed her face. Then she set her jaw and kept typing. "I just need you to step out for a moment while we sort the ticketing," she said. "What actually requires me to leave the aircraft over a problem you haven't shown me?" Bridget did not have an answer. She tapped the line marked voluntary deplane and saved it. "I did not agree to that," Diane said, loud enough that the row behind her turned. "Attach my statement before you close anything. Do not mark this voluntary." A young man in row 3 had already lifted his phone and started recording the tablet over Bridget's shoulder. Bridget saved the entry anyway. The signature line was still empty. The captain, a man named Elliot Marsh, arrived a few minutes later with a version of events already shaped for him. "She's refusing to deplane after accepting reaccommodation," Bridget told him, keeping her eyes on the tablet rather than on Diane. Marsh glanced at the screen long enough to see the blank line where a signature should have been. Then he looked past it toward the clock, counting down to their scheduled pushback. "I never accepted anything," Diane said. "There's no signature on that field because I never gave one." "We can sort the details at the gate," Marsh said. "Right now I need the aisle clear so we can push back on time. If I walk off this aircraft now, the record will say I agreed to leave." Marsh did not ask to see the reservation. He radioed the gate and gave officers a version that matched Bridget's, not Diane's. 2 airport officers boarded a short while later. The version they had been given left out everything that mattered. It did not mention that Diane's seat was valid. It did not mention that she had denied consent. It did not mention that the signature line was empty. One officer hesitated when Diane said clearly, "This is a false record, and I am not consenting to leave." But the captain gave the order anyway. Hesitation was not the same as refusal. Diane stood on her own rather than making them carry her. "I am not leaving voluntarily," she said loud enough for the cabin to hear. "My seat is valid. I do not consent. The record should reflect that officers removed me." Her folder slipped from her arm near the galley, and papers fanned across the carpet. When she bent to gather them, her phone struck the doorframe. The crack across the glass split into a second line. Her coat stayed folded over the seat back, forgotten in the moment. No one in the cabin said a word as she was walked past them and up the jet bridge. Preston Wade was already settling into Suite 1 Alpha before she reached the door. "Situation's resolved," Bridget told the captain, closing the tablet. Diane stood in the jet bridge with an officer beside her. "The door may close," she said quietly. "The record stays open." She called one number from the jet bridge. The man who answered was Adrian Voss. Diane was the managing partner whose fund chaired the creditor committee holding approval rights over the financing keeping Solara in the air. Voss was the general counsel who answered to her, not the airline. "Flight 118, Gate 9, Harrogate International," she said. "I was removed from Seat 1 Alpha. The system shows a voluntary deplane code with no signature attached. The aircraft is still on the ground. I need a full record hold before it leaves. And I need it now." Her voice did not rise once. Voss did not ask her to repeat herself. Under Solara's financing agreement, an unresolved legal hold involving passenger removal suspended the airline's authority to depart. Within minutes, Solara's operations center placed a hold on Flight 118. The aircraft had already begun taxiing when the message reached the cockpit. Marsh told the cabin they were returning to the gate because of a maintenance indicator. The first officer, Danielle Cho, had already read the actual message. She wrote the legal hold reference number on the notepad clipped beside the controls. That handwritten number would later prove Marsh knew the real reason for the return before he made the announcement. When the aircraft reached the gate, Solara's independent compliance director, Naomi Castellan, boarded with the airport station manager and legal counsel. Diane came last. She wore the same sweatshirt, the same sneakers. The same cracked phone was still in her hand. Nothing about her had changed. Only what people now understood about the fund behind her name. Castellan opened the passenger record on her own tablet and read it aloud in the order it had actually happened. "Confirmed seat, fully paid fare, no defect noted," she said. Then a VIP request. Then a screen opened with nothing to fix. Then a reaccommodation entered. Then a voluntary code saved with no signature, no verbal consent on record, and no passenger statement attached. She looked at Bridget. "That's not a fare defect. That's an employee selection." She tapped the blank line. "That's not consent. That's an unsigned field." Then she looked toward Marsh. "And that is not a voluntary departure." Officers removed her. The passenger from row 3 stepped forward and sent Castellan the video from his phone. It captured Diane objecting before Bridget saved the voluntary code. It also captured the empty signature line. Before anyone offered an apology, Diane asked for one thing. "Correct the record first," she said. "Do not delete it. Correct it and leave the original underneath so no one can claim this never happened." The new entry was locked under legal hold. It stated that Diane had not voluntarily deplaned. Her original seat had remained valid throughout. No fare defect had existed. No signature had been obtained. Airport officers had acted on information the airline itself had never verified. Captain Marsh was removed from command pending review. The review found that no safety threat had ever existed. It also found that he had chosen an on-time departure over a blank signature line he had seen with his own eyes. Bridget's access to removal codes was frozen. At her disciplinary hearing, she admitted that Preston's seat requests were something crew had learned to accommodate without question. It had become as ordinary as moving around a piece of furniture that had always been in the room. The audit that followed examined earlier removal records. Investigators found 11 cases marked voluntary deplane with no completed signature. 7 involved black passengers. 3 ended with the seat going to a VIP within the hour. 1 file belonged to Thomas Aldridge, a wheelchair user who had been pressured out of a premium seat months earlier. A different attendant had decided, without documentation, that his aisle access needed to be reevaluated. When Castellan's team reopened his file, Thomas was quiet for several seconds. Then he said he had stopped booking premium cabins after that flight. He believed complaining again would only get him labeled difficult a second time. His record was corrected. He received a formal acknowledgement and compensation for the seat he never should have lost. Diane did not treat her own fund as blameless. She told Solara's board that the financing her group had extended kept the airline flying without ever asking how passenger removals were coded. The failure to ask had been its own kind of complicity. She kept the rescue package in place, but its next stage was tied to an independent passenger treatment monitor. No aircraft could push back while an active removal record hold remained unresolved. Preston Wade lost his seat on the advisory board once the pattern came to light. Solara also ended the informal courtesy that had allowed his preference to become policy. Months later, on another Solara flight, a passenger in economy refused a downgrade offer. The gate agent checked the reservation. There was no defect. She told the passenger that her seat was hers to keep. No special screen opened. No false code was entered. Diane heard about the incident secondhand. She did not need to be there. The system had worked without knowing who the passenger was. Diane kept her damaged phone in a drawer long after replacing it. The double crack remained visible across the glass. The most dangerous lie in the entire incident had never been spoken aloud in the cabin. It had been typed into a field with no signature. It had been entered into a system built to make a forced removal look exactly like something she had chosen. This is a fictional story created for storytelling purposes.